He's one of us.
We accept you.
It's the Cheap Chills Show.
Very nice.
And now, here is your host, Ben Walker Story.
Welcome to the Cheap Chills podcast on art and monsters. How do you like the new tagline? I think it sums up what we do here pretty nicely. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Ben Walker Story. I am a cartoonist, illustrator, video creator. I'm literally trying to get to everything at least once before I die. And I like spooky, weird stuff, monster movies, etc. So I'm just getting together with some of my favorite creators and talking some shop and, of course, talking monsters. Just so you're aware, I did record this conversation that's coming up and this intro right now in the kitchen with the whole family because they're doing some major road work, scraping asphalt and stuff like that, right across the street from Walker Story Manor. And so this is actually the quietest room in the house, supposedly. I'm so thrilled to bring you this conversation. For this episode, I got a chance to catch up with my friend, world-renowned painter Isabel Samaras. You know, years before we even met, I had discovered her work through art magazines like Juxtapoz and Hi Fructose. I was blown away by Isabel's work because she's not just an incredible painter, but she's someone who has a take on popular culture and romance, sexuality, and just a sense of humor that is all her own. So enough of me, let's just get to it. Here's my chat with Isabel Samaras. Isabel.
Yes, Ben.
First of all, thank you for being here and doing this.
It's absolutely my pleasure and joy.
Can I just start by telling you my favorite memory of you?
Ooh, please. This is delightful. It's like a time machine. Okay.
Remember when do you still do the 111 Minna stuff? Do they still do that where you go and have Sketch Tuesday?
They might still do that. I haven't been able to make one of those for a while. Just my schedule got kind of bananas.
Yeah. Well, when I had moved out to the Bay Area, and started trying to get in on the art scene out there, and was showing up to as many of those Sketch Tuesdays as possible, right? And so you were there for, seems like most of them, all of them.
Yeah, I used to go a lot.
And I would get caught up in, okay, to back up for people listening, they would have this thing called Sketch Tuesday at one of the galleries / bars, basically, in San Francisco called 111 Minna. And artists would show up and draw live. And most of them would be like invited, but you could also kind of hang out on the sidelines uninvited.
Yeah, they would do both. They would invite artists, and for the invited artists, they would set up this long table with a black tablecloth and little place settings with your name. So you'd show up and there'd be a spot for you, like a fancy dinner, except there's no food. You just sit there and drink and draw. And then everybody else could hang out and drink and draw all around us and stuff.
And the dirty secret is if you hang out on the sidelines, you get better lighting so you can see what you're doing. and you can set up like a little kiosk of things to sell and stuff. So I would take advantage of that sometimes too. Anyway, I was getting caught up in the anxiety of what can I draw that people will want to buy, these strangers lingering behind me, And I got to talking with you. I think I said something along those lines that I was concerned or something. And you said, I'm just trying to draw something that makes me laugh.
Yeah. That's it.
And I still think about that, and I still take that with me of like, just do that and don't worry about like how good it is or if your hands look like they were chiseled by Michelangelo.
Right. I think that was the night that I was drawing owls that had like dumb t-shirt phrases on their chests. So it was like an owl sitting on a branch that said free mustache rides or something. I was just trying to make myself laugh. So
you were doing like hip hop owls, right? And there was like gold
and then there was a whole bunch of birds wearing, like gold dookie chains and
that's right,
Biggie Bird and stuff. Yeah, just trying to make myself laugh.
That's so much better of a goal than anything else you can go for, I guess.
Well, the world can be a dark and scary place, and I figure what can I bring? How can I help? That I have this, oh, we can get into that. That's a long one, but I have this kind of, I didn't realize for a while, but I had this need to be of service. I have this need to be of service in some way. And sometimes being an artist feels so pointless and frivolous. It's like, what's the most crawl up my own butt thing that I could do, with my time? I know I'll just paint whatever the fuck I want to, chase my muse off into the woods, la, 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 and spend my days doing that. And it can feel a little disconnected from, reality and the world and my fellow human beings and stuff. So I do think sometimes that when I think about it, it's like, well, what if I bring beauty back with me? I go off on these journeys. I go off on this solo sojourn. Can I bring back something funny? Can I bring back something beautiful? Can I bring back something that makes us feel connected in some way, right? So that we go, oh, I'm not the only one who had this weird thought or had these strange reactions to these things. Like other people feel it too. So I used to have a blog a long time ago called I Feel It Too. And it was kind of the same thing. It was like, I think we're connected. That's what I realized when I started making art. It's like, oh, I thought I was such a weirdo. Turns out I'm not the only one, which is delightful. I love not being the only weirdo.
It seems like, yeah, kind of being in your lane almost by being you is kind of one of those lessons that takes a long time to figure out, but that you could still be of service to people by just doing what you're passionate about. And if you're concerned about like serious stuff going on in the world, there are people who are very good at like addressing that stuff. And I try to do what I can, but often it feels like people don't get what I'm trying to communicate, or it just wasn't really my lane almost when I try to get into serious stuff or political things. So I do.
That's a whole different superpower, right? I mean, to be able to channel art into that kind of communication in a meaningful way. The one and only time, you want to hear a short funny story?
Yeah.
The one and only time I thought, I'm going to really take this on. It was, when Bush was president, and I did a painting of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I was like, because I'm very politically active. I grew up in the burbs outside of DC. I started going to marches, with my mom when I was like a tiny child. And that's just always been a part of my life. I have hundreds of postcards sitting on my dining room table right now, waiting to be written to prospective voters. Like I'm very politically active, but I've always kept them in separate lanes. And one day I was like, it's time, I need to stop being so, like frivolous with it, that we have things we have to talk about. So I did this painting of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and it was Karl Rove, Condi Rice, Dick Cheney, and Bush riding these horses. Flaming stars are falling out of the sky. The Capitol is on fire. Everything's on fire. It was all done in these sort of sepia and orange tones. It wasn't very big, but it is what it is. And long story short, I thought, we'll try a balloon, see if this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, the gods of art, send me a message. The gallery caught fire. All the art burned up.
Oh, dang.
And I just felt like I could not ask for a clearer signal from the art gods that is not my job. Other people do it better than me. My job is to do the other stuff. And I'm going to let the people who really know how to voice and channel that anger and message take care of that. And I'll just stay over in my part of the forest and let them do that. So
it's like you truly had an apocalyptic outcome there.
Yes. I actually considered that possibly the painting was cursed, that putting that many evil visages, channeling that much of those 4 people's evil energy into one piece made it a cursed object. So,
I do love a good cursed object, though. It's like
I know. Maybe I could sell the remains on eBay or something, where they in the same zone with all the cursed dolls and stuff.
Yeah. We could reboot Friday the 13th, the series.
Around the
this could be the first episode.
Oh
no, but that made me think of how you because you can paint so well, and like in this classic.
Thank you.
Well, Avi. In this classic, like museum quality style,
Oh, I'm getting a puffed head. Thank you.
But it reminds me of how, it seems like being an artist, a lot of times you just want to see something exist, you want to see something happen. And since nobody else will do it for you, you're like, well, I guess I got to do my best to try to make this into some kind of reality that people that can
100%.
see. And so with that one, you were kind of doing a different message than I see in a lot of your stuff, which is more like, I don't know, like with stuff where it's I don't know, Batman and Robin or Batman and Catwoman, in a romantic scene, or, all this sort of romantic or sexual situations. With that, it's like a character that you love, and you can tell that they have like a hole in their life, that they couldn't be fulfilled as a grown up because they're not, Batman isn't, he's missing a huge chunk of his life, right?
Right.
And these other characters. So then you create that reality for yourself and for anybody else who wants to see it, to be like,
Yeah.
look, here's this thing that could be happening, and you almost like you're gifting them the experience of a romantic relationship.
Absolutely. Thank you for seeing that and noticing it and talking about it. That is 100%, like the little 100% emoji, like boom, 100% the impetus behind those early pieces. The first pieces that I did sort of in that vein, I did when I was still living in New York, and it's exactly what you said. I wanted something to exist that didn't exist. The kind of TV shows that I grew up watching. I was a latchkey kid. I had a lot of time on my own when I came home, and the TV was my companion. You would just turn it on for company. And even if I wasn't in the same room with it, I could hear Barney Miller, or Gilligan's Island or whatever in the next room. And, at that point, it was just reruns all the time. So you even knew the shows already. So you didn't have to sit and watch them. You're like, oh, this is that episode where, this happens. Oh, Jeannie is doing, this, and Major Nelson's doing that. Like, you didn't need to rivet yourself to the TV, but it was companionable. But those shows were so shallow in so many ways. Those people did not have rich interiority. And certainly Batman never, it just seemed so obvious to me that he and Catwoman needed to get together, and now of course there's, books and movies and comics and, toys and plenty of art, but it didn't exist at the time. And I really, really wanted it to. So I found all these old tin lunchboxes.
Oh yeah.
At a shop up in Spanish Harlem that was just selling them for like $1.99 a piece, and they were like Holly Hobby and plaid things, and like those little kids handing each other's flowers, like love is, they weren't, to all the people who get horrified when they hear that I sand off lunchboxes and stuff, they weren't anything really super cool.
There's more than one.
Yeah. There's lots of them, and it's fine. But the first one I ever made was a Batman and Catwoman lunchbox, because I just wanted it to exist. And the whole series was called Lunchboxes for Adults. It was sort of like grown-up lunchboxes, and they were pretty pervy. They were semi, you could call it pornographic, you could call it perverse, like however, wherever you fall on that spectrum of how you feel about sexy.
I would.
and then clap a little. They had to exist. They didn't exist. And I made them, and I didn't make them with any expectation of ever let not even showing them to people, let alone putting them in a gallery and selling them. I really wanted to possess them myself. So I made a couple, and then just happened to be talking to, what was it? Oh, I was talking to somebody, this wonderful, Pam Summers used to have an amazing little gallery in the East Village called the Illustration Gallery. And I heard that they were having an erotic art show. And I sauntered in there like, well, I happen to have all these erotic lunchboxes. I think at that point I had one or two, and I showed her some slides. I had my friend shoot slides, so it looked real professional, and Pam knew me. We'd worked together on some stuff, and I showed the slides to her, and she was like, these are great. Well, first she walked out of the room, and I thought that was the end of it. I thought I was supposed to get up and leave. She just looked at them and was like, this is disgusting. I'm just going to leave so you can leave without me having to shame you into leaving. But she came back with a contract, and I was like, oh, this is happening. Like, this is really, this is my first gallery show. And she said they wanted like 6. And I was like, I got to go paint.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. I have a quick business question, and then we'll get back into the romanticism of it all.
Oh, all of it.
I've been wondering if you paint something or make art on a medium that is, we could call it lowbrow, something like a lunchbox, something that isn't going to have the worth of, generally, like if you have a blank canvas or a wood panel, that's already like more value than a lunchbox that's going to get painted. So then
Certainly at that time. Yeah.
if you make finished art on something that is considered not worth anything, are you shooting yourself in the foot at all, or is it so Dadaistic or whatever that it becomes like the toilet that's been signed?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, at the time, honestly, I really wasn't thinking about that at all because I genuinely did not expect to ever show them, let alone sell them. I thought I would be buried with them.
Yeah.
That they would go into the coffin with me when I die, which is sort of my expectation for most of my art. I'm like, this is too weird. Nobody's going to want this. But once I did those, I think, after a while, it was like, it's a lot of work painting on 6 surfaces. I need just one thing. And I still wanted something that had, and maybe you're tipping into something there with this idea that it's sort of like a disposable or a low value object, because I liked that. I liked that it had a meaning or a resonance with us before I painted on it.
Yeah.
Right. Whether it had value, who knows? I mean, now I guess people like lunchboxes. At the time, they were literally selling them for like $1 and $1.99 because they were just garbage. But at the time, it was just a way of making something that had some sort of resonance with us before you even saw what the imagery was. So, even maybe from like across the room, you'd be like, oh, she's got some lunchboxes on a shelf. Let's go see. Wait a minute. What? I liked this idea of like a double take. I like this idea of, it having a purpose. A painting without a painting on it is just a stupid piece of fabric or a dumb piece of wood. Like that didn't appeal to me. For the longest time, that had zero appeal to me. I actively shunned that because I wanted it to have some kind of cultural meaning and that you would have some sort of connection to it before you even saw what the image was. So after the lunchboxes, I started painting on old TV trays because I grew up hanging out with my grandparents a lot. And we always ate dinner on a little folding metal TV tray in front of the TV, watching whatever my grandparents wanted to watch. That was just life. So I had such affection. I have affection for these things. I have affection for all of it together. The lunch boxes, the TV trays, and then the characters and the images that I'm putting on them. Like all of it is just born out of this like cauldron of childhood affection and love.
It's all joy.
It's all joy, yeah, and perviness.
And that counts. That counts. And it just made me realize that, like, it's a callback to where we got started, where, you were trying to make yourself laugh, and I'm still caught up in the anxiety of, am I still going to be broke after this shows and doesn't sell?
We all still have that.
Yeah.
All of us. Every single one of us still has that. Just FYI.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever go away. You can pile other stuff on top of it and sort of distract yourself and be the dancing frog and stuff, but it's all still there.
Well, in my household, we haven't talked about them in a long time, but we call those kulaks, which is a term that Amanda, my wife, came up with. Because I had gotten into all these group shows that were pop culture based. And so I ended up making all this artwork that I wouldn't have thought to make except for the theme that I was, invited to be part of. So on the one hand, it's great to be like in your notable galleries and be part of something and be like, wow, I'm part of this cool group of artists that's showing this in this big group show. That's great. But then you end up with all these unsold pieces that, some of them would sell, but a lot of them wouldn't. They'd get shipped back to you. And you're like, I wouldn't have maybe painted this or this subject matter if not for this theme.
Oh, yeah.
So now I've got all this artwork that's sort of me, but not, right? I mean,
yeah.
So the kulak is a character from Wet Hot American Summer, one of the camp counselors. And so I painted him jumping over the hay bale in that scene in the movie. And so I thought it was funny, but we still have it. And it's one of our many kulaks. Does that story make sense at all?
No, it does. It totally does. I joke all the time that since I've, sort of changed over, transitioned to painting on wood panels, because I had this desire to paint things that weren't, 12 by 18 rectangles, that if I have leftover paintings when I die, they can just use those to build my coffin. They can just cut them into the proper shapes and saw them up and nail them together and just pop me inside.
Nice.
All good. Off to the crematorium.
As long as it's environmentally sound, you don't want any like
Yeah, it's probably not a
oil
good idea
paints or
to
anything in the.
burn all that paint and varnish and stuff. But
Do you work in oils or acrylics now?
I work in oil. When I was doing the lunchboxes and the TV trays, it was all acrylic and enamel. I was using enamel on all the edges and stuff because I wanted them to be durable. I wanted them to not chip. I just pictured the edges of things chipping off and stuff. So I was trying to make them, durable. And I loved the TV trays were great because they were indestructible. You could pack them in boxes and ship them all over the place. There's nothing to get damaged. They couldn't, you'd have to really bend it in half to mess them up. But then around the same time, I had this impulse that I wanted to paint things that were bigger than the size of a TV tray, which was somewhat limiting. And also things that weren't just that one rectangular shape. I thought I would switch over. And that was sort of being nudged. I had a couple friends that were sort of giving me this gentle push. Mark Ryden and Eric White were both sort of, coming to me and saying, I think you'd be a lot happier if you tried oil paint. You're kind of pounding a square peg into a round hole. Yeah. The last acrylic painting that I did, which I have here because I love it so much, I just decided to keep it. It's got so many, extenders and glaze mediums and all this stuff. I really was trying to make acrylic be something that it's not meant to be.
Right.
And Eric even gave me like a couple jars of like painting medium that he'd made and stuff. So like, pusher, like, yeah, the first hit's free. Try this, baby. And the first couple oil paintings I did were truly horrendous. They were really mushy and I couldn't quite figure out what I was doing. But I love it now. Now it's just phenomenal. And I just, everything about it makes me happy. It's glorious.
It seems like to really do well with acrylics at all, you really maybe, I don't know who would do this, but if you can start with oils, because it's sort of like, when you're learning to juggle and you start with things that
no, I don't. I tried and failed at learning to juggle, but go on.
Okay. Well, a random teacher in community college wanted to show us how to juggle so that we could learn things we wouldn't expect to. So you start with scarves that are like those taffeta or whatever. I don't know what fabric it is, but it's that light kind of see-through fabric that takes a while to drop. That might come out of a magician's sleeve.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so you start with that and they take a while to drop. And so it slows things down and then you can get the pattern down and then you can go on to other things that drop faster. And it's sort of like that with painting, I think, where if you start with oils, they take a long time to dry. So you can figure out like your wet into wet blending and smearing things around. And then if you get into acrylics, you can go, oh, okay, the acrylics dry super fast. But if you move fast enough and just get the blending done real quick, you can kind of make those same things happen, but not obviously as refined. But do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. And I think that would be an interesting path for somebody to try, oil first. And I think they would be both charmed and frustrated by moving to acrylic. It is, I do miss sometimes the speed with which acrylic dries and how quickly you can change your mind. You can just paint something and go, crap.
Yeah.
Like that's not working at all. And because it's acrylic, you just like, just right over it, start over again. And with oil, it's like, well, I can wipe it down. I can wait for it to dry. I can sand it off tomorrow. It's like, there's all these, I can try to paint over it, but it's going to be hard because this is transparent. It's a more tedious, it's like steering an ocean liner, instead of a little motorboat. You just have to, the big changes are slower, harder.
Right.
But the blends are glorious. Yeah. When I started sizing up, when I started working on bigger and bigger, surfaces, the idea of trying to, make a really beautiful fleshy thigh blend in acrylic was just nightmarish. You have to mix so many colors and this and that. And then oil, it's just like, it's very a la-di-da kind of thing.
I need to find mediums that make me not get so precious about stuff and get into like blending and rendering and stuff. And then work just never gets done. And my wife
Have you mucked around with oil?
Not since art school. Really, we would do the live painting of models, of course, there, but I haven't done it since. I guess I'm kind kind of like smell sensitive. I mean, so
I
there's a
have
lot
good
of
news for
smelliness
you.
involved. Okay.
I have really good news for you. And for anybody else who doesn't want to die based on the art mediums that they're using, oil paint has been through a sea change, or has some of it has gone through a sea change. There's water mixable oil paint now,
Oh
which
yeah.
is freaking amazing. I'm transitioning my studio into I have transitioned my studio into water mixable oil paint. Basically, the tube of paint, a standard tube of paint. Here, let's get technical for a second.
Yeah.
This is going to be really boring. Everybody, go get a cup of coffee. A tube of paint is, you've got your pigment. If it's a high quality tube of paint, you got more pigment, and you've got some little filler binder, and there's oil in there. And the only difference between a regular tube of oil paint and water mixable oil is that they figured out how to make oil that breaks down with soap and water,
Oh, cool.
which is just amazing. So you don't have to use solvents anymore. You don't have to use turpentine, not that most people even do, but all that terpenoid stuff that's supposed to be better, all that stuff's banned in Europe, where they understand that these things are also not good for us. So you don't have to have any of the stinky stuff in your studio at all. You can have just all the glory and none of the gory, gutty, awful, smelly, flammable, all that stuff.
Okay.
We can totally nerd out about that sometime. If you're even remotely curious, I can talk your ear off. I've done so much research. I've talked to the materials chemists, all these different paint companies. I really, I love research and I'm a super nerd. So I really got into it before I decided
I
to
don't know.
try this stuff out.
You just reminded me of not you reminded me of my mom, but you reminded me of conversations
Sunny.
with my mom where something gets banned in another country. She just sees that as government overreach in these socialist countries, like in America where it's free and
Right.
it doesn't matter. It's free. It's, it's available here and it's not banned here. So, my family is driving me nuts. Jeff, you take the dog out there. Say hi to Isabel and then take the dog out of here. Okay. All right. He's going
Hello.
to say hi.
Yeah, I'm not like a religious zealot, like everybody must paint in oils. It's not for everybody, and not everybody wants to do it. But if you're at all curious, if you're oil curious, I think what the dog being dragged out.
I was going to cut this out, but now.
Oh my God, that was brilliant.
Okay, pull them out. Put them out.
Comedy. Just the slow drag across the floor was really nice.
All right, I think he needs help. Hold on.
Yeah, of course.
Well, okay, so about painting, I busted out the acrylic paints for the first time in 7 years.
Oh, good for you. Right on.
I just kind of gave up on it for a couple of reasons back when we were still in San Francisco. One being that Amanda and I started getting sad whenever something would sell. And it's like, why did we put all this heart and soul into something and time, and then somebody else gets to have it in their family for the rest of their lives because they had $400 and I wanted it. I wanted that $400.
Yeah.
It's kind of feels a little unfair sometimes. So I started getting into stuff that would turn into prints and other mediums that weren't so gallery oriented. And having a kid, you just can't have any messy stuff around.
Right.
Our living spaces are so small that it just wasn't worth trying to have a painting set up anywhere. But I busted them out so I could start working on custom leather jackets.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I guess that kind of goes back to the thing with the lunch pail of if I spend the amount of time working on something that could, go up in a gallery somewhere if they would allow me to do so. But instead I'm spending that time painting on a jacket, I'm not going to, like we talked about, I'm not going to worry about the value of it or not.
Right.
But it makes you think. But anyway, it's been fun painting again on leather.
Can I ask you a question?
Oh, yeah.
What was your impetus? Like, when did you start making art or making images or drawing or painting? I mean, what did that look like?
For me, it kind of started beyond whatever every other kid does. Every kid's
Mm-hmm.
an artist in drawing.
Right. We all
And then,
start off as little artists.
yeah, and then it kind of curtails off for a lot of people, most people, I guess. Um, but it kind of got ignited I was in fifth grade, so that would have made me 11 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And the He-Man figures came out, and He-Man cartoon came out. And so me and my friend were just into looking at the figures, and it was the first time you could buy an action figure with this exaggerated anatomy, you know. Your GI Joes were just little guys in fatigues and stuff. So now there's these people or these three-dimensional things that you could look at and be like, oh, I see how musculature, sort of these forms work, as best as you can at age 11. And the whole mythology of this like space barbarian, and he's old timey because he's a barbarian, like some kind of Middle Earth thing, but also, Jet, I'm going to need you to not play with the balloon, okay? No balloon play right now, okay? Um, and so like, oh, I would love Conan, but Conan should have a motorcycle, and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like we were saying, of mixing all the stuff that you love as an 11-year-old boy, you get to mix it all together for this thing and just be greedy about it. And so we loved that too. And so we started coming up with our own characters and drawing our own, stories and that sort of thing. So that got me into it. And I feel like that's kind of still what I'm doing, of like, I can make my own thing that maybe, could take off with its own stories and characters and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And just getting into reading comics and copying Wolverine or Spider-Man or whatever as best I could and stuff. So that kind of really got me through high school. And
Yeah, so many people learn to draw from comics. I see
yeah.
that so often. It's great.
What about you? What got you started?
Well, I think very much like you said, right? We're all little artists when we start off. We're all given the opportunity. Most of us. I mean, I think if you grew up in any typical school in America, you're given lots of opportunities to paint and draw and make stuff out of clay and hammer things together, make art with macaroni noodles glued onto a piece of construction paper, and you were given
Mhm.
so many opportunities to be creative. If you go to a really cool school, you don't even have to make representational stuff. They
Yeah.
they emphasize never ask the children what it is. Just let them create freely. So it's just all stuff. And then pretty much across the board, I think pretty much every school, including probably most private schools, and maybe except for Waldorf. I think Waldorf schools are the only ones that like let them keep making stuff. But everybody else, it's like there's just some invisible line that you cross, and you're expected to just drop everything. Right? It's like, put down the crayons, put down the paintbrushes. Now it's time to learn your multiplication tables. And I think there's a whole pack of us that obviously just said, no,
Yeah.
I don't want to put it down. I want to keep making this stuff. I still to this day don't know some of my multiplication tables, to my great embarrassment. It doesn't really affect my life. But I just kept drawing. And I think later, and maybe even earlier, it was sort of I don't know when the thing occurred in my head that it was like a pencil or a paintbrush or whatever was sort of like a magic wand, that you could draw things that didn't exist. I remember drawing, I loved Star Wars when Star Wars, the first movie came out, and I was just like, oh my God, I saw that movie over and over again. And Leia was cool and everything, but there were no chick Jedi. And I was like, why can't there be a chick Jedi? So I made a lady Jedi paper doll, for myself. It was just like, I want this to exist. It's going to exist. She happened to have red hair. Just was, a thing. Basically, it was me.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think it was just, and then that continued, that just kept going. And it's sort of like I was so, it's going to sound overly dramatic. Everybody's story, I think, sounds overly dramatic unless you really have, serious trauma in your life. But I was so unpopular, in school. I was so radioactively unpopular and so shunned as a kid that I felt kind of othered right out of the human race, which I think is why I vibed so much to sort of bring it back to, I think so the theme of your podcast, it was why I vibe so much with monsters, more than my fellow humans. Like they also seem to be shunned and othered,
Yeah.
by humans and stuff. And stories about these creatures sort of making their way through or trying to make their way through the human world really connected with me. And then when I got a little older, the heartbreak of it was really settling into my chest in this very kind of heavy way. And that's when it was like, okay, I need to rewrite some of these stories. And I'm not, I love to write. I love words. I love language, but my primary form of expression is painting. And so it became about how can I re-envision some of these stories. The Bride of Frankenstein was such an obsession. It was like, God damn it, that's just so fucking sad. Like, it just killed me. It's one of my favorite movies, and it breaks my heart. It shatters it every time I see it. And I've done so many paintings where I've just tried to envision, like, what if they did this instead? What if they got to do this? And this idea of, like, giving monsters leisurely Sunday activities that they can do. They can hang out and play croquet. They can prune in the rose bushes, or free of being hunted. They can go on a relaxing vacation and sit in a lawn chair under the moonlight and sip a Bloody Mary,
Yeah.
and have loving relationships with each other. It's, I think that's just been a thread that's just been pulling through my work since I was itty bitty.
Interesting. I've done the same thing with feeling for characters or even just historical figures and that sort of thing, and wanting to make things better for them.
Yeah.
But as far as like the lesson learned from Bride of Frankenstein, I think it's really interesting I'm glad that story is out there, because like for anybody, but maybe especially for guys, it's a good lesson to be like, just because you think somebody was made for you doesn't make it so. They still have to be just as on board with it as you. And so here's this person that was literally made for the monster, and she wasn't into it, and they gotta accept that. He didn't do a very good job of accepting that, but it's a good lesson for us.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. It's so funny. I've been so caught up in just sort of the heartbreak of the poor lonely monster. I didn't really think about, like, maybe she's just not that into you, dude.
Yeah.
Also, but again, like, in a perfect world, maybe they would be allowed to go off and find other people if that relationship isn't like the one.
Yeah. It was the first monster abusive relationship. He didn't let us do that.
It's worse than codependency.
Yeah. And also my other beef with this movie, which is one of my favorite movies, so beautiful, such a beautifully shot movie.
For sure.
And there's such weird stuff that happens in it that I think we forget about. But people that get all pedantic, is that the word? About he's the monster. He's Frankenstein's monster. He's not Frankenstein.
Right.
Well, I mean, there's so many movies where this monster is called Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Including this.
Right. The Bride of Frankenstein. She's not marrying the doctor.
Right. They decided to make a bunch of movies where they call her Frankenstein. So
yeah.
I'm never doing this again. We should have just recorded it in the room where you could hear the people cutting through the sidewalk outside. Today's episode is brought to you by My Shadow Play digital brushes. If you're anything like me, you want your digital art to look as much as possible like what you create on paper. That's why I made a set of brushes called Shadow Play Ink and Wax. These brushes are based on my markings and strokes. There's hatching strokes that can be quickly built up for that Edward Gorey look, and a bunch more tools for making gritty, imperfect art in Clip Studio Paint. There's also Shadow Play Gothifier, which is a bunch of seamless patterns, decorations, accessories that let you instantly paint all things goth. From spiderwebs and bats to clothing accessories like zippers and spikes and ripped fishnet stockings. And through October, you can also get my bonus set, Goth Boy, for 25 cents. This one is a collection of body parts and clothing, kind of like fashion plates or Mighty Men and Monster Makers, but with goth boys. All these sets are on the Cheap Chills Etsy shop. Click the link in the show notes or just do a search for Cheap Chills Etsy to see the shop. And while you're there, check it out. I've got t-shirts, art prints, and mouse pads, all that kind of stuff for people who love all things spooky and weird. And now, let's get back to it. No, but remember the doctor who does, he's like
Polidori? Is it
the one
Pretorius?
He's like trying to convince Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah, Dr. Pretorius.
Yeah, and he makes those little miniature people and keeps them in glass bubbles.
In their little glass cloches, yeah.
Yeah, that was nuts. That was really
weird. The king, the queen. What was it? There was a ballerina. There was a devil. He'd conjured a tiny, like Satan, like a little tiny devil, which is also extra weird. Like the other ones are just sort of jobs, like king, queen, ballerina, and then Satan.
It's pretty cool. They're going to get to that pretty soon now. With all the technology, they'll be able to do that for us for sure.
Any day now.
3D printing plus AI.
Plus all the DNA that they just sold from 23andMe. All our DNA can be harvested and turned into tiny little people.
Oh, now we got to reboot Weird Science with this premise. I think that would be good too. What was I going to ask you about? Oh, what about just like the visuals of Bride of Frankenstein and all these like Universal movies back then, the monsters, Frankenstein, especially Bride of Frankenstein. I really would notice how it was shot like on sets, and the landscape would be like simplified almost to the point where it could be a play, that could be on stage. And as far as I think most people, especially me, really have a hard time with like backgrounds and environments and stuff, and instead of just having a character, you want to illustrate them in some world, in some kind of environment. And movies like that really show that you can simplify like a landscape and make it approachable to turn into a readable visual. I love that.
I'm spacing right now on the name of the the cinematographer, the set, the people that worked on Bride of Frankenstein with James Whale, the director. But I think it's a German cinematographer, and he was heavily influenced by German expressionism. So it's not just exactly what you're talking about. It's not just like like a castle. There's these weird angles. Things are coming in. The landscape is kind of topsy-turvy. Like things are coming in at all these there's really strong black shadows, and it's all referencing like these really kind of cattywampus angles and stuff from German expressionist art and painting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which is super cool because it makes you a little uncomfortable. You look at that stuff and it's like hearing an odd note, in a piece of music where you're kind of like, ooh, that kind of hits me a little funny.
But it's also pointing out that it's okay to look a little flat, and it's encouraged, I think, like to make something readable as far as like your audience can understand what they're looking at, because you flattened things out and made them more iconic in a way, like symbols almost. That's okay. And it just kind of reminds me of how a lot of stuff now, as far as TV or movies, they don't really seem to have that philosophy. It's almost like every 2D cartoon has to be made 3D. SpongeBob, we were watching the Rugrats in 3D. The stuff that really looked cool in 2D and almost looked like kind of new wave, like Rugrats, they took all the kind of the fun out of it and turned it in like everything has to look, it's going to be better because it's in 3D. And
there's this need. Well. I know there's this need to sort of constantly be reinventing and making everything new. And there's always this idea like, oh, well, the way to make, what I think is gorgeous, flat, cell painted, animation. Oh, we'll just make everything 3D now. It's not an improvement. I mean, some things are cool. Some things look cool when they're sort of more cinematic or whatever, or you get all this opportunity to have like light and shadow play and stuff, but it doesn't serve everything equally. I love flat old animation style. There's a whole, also the background paintings, so beautiful.
Mhm.
Like Scooby-Doo, there's a whole
Yeah.
Instagram account, I think Scoobyscapes,
Right. I
that's just
follow that.
gorgeous because all the colors and the background paintings are so great.
Hashtag Scoobyscapes. Follow them.
Shout
Yeah,
out.
so good. And like I've been, sort of relentlessly copying their style a little bit for character design too, a little bit. And I'm still trying to figure out like a way to cartoon and simplify and get some stuff done without it taking forever. So I've been, inspired by Scooby-Doo art and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that 70s kind of stuff.
All that Hanna-Barbera goodness.
Yeah. And I think like growing up, I don't know, I grew up in like the 80s and then into the 90s as a young guy. So as I was learning about art and stuff, it was all in the mid 90s and stuff. It was very inspired by the 60s and the 50s of that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
flat like jazz album cover kind of UPA kind of stuff. So there was like Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack and all these kind of cartoons where they were very much pulling
Powerpuff
from,
Girls.
they're pulling from that flat, super iconic 50s look. And so I was very influenced by that. And I still love the look, but I've never been able to kind of do it and have it resonate as being like from me. Even if I sit down and be like, I'm going to draw some flat character designs and I'm not going to render anything, it just never
Mm-hmm.
works out. It always comes out something else, which I guess is a lesson about art and what is your art. Do you get that where you want something
Well,
to look a certain way and then it comes out something else, but it's still you?
I have so many questions. Like, it's part of me is sort of like, well, what happens? What does it look like when you're done? What part of it isn't pleasing to you? Where is it going sideways?
I guess I just okay, we talked about math anxiety earlier.
Yeah.
There's something about trying to simplify art down to making something work in 2 or 3 colors.
Mm-hmm.
Having a really solid color scheme where you're not deviating anywhere and you're sticking within some real limits in order to keep it simple and clean and, I don't know, effective. So that's hard. And it starts to become like mentally exhausting for me to figure out stuff. Like I was just trying to digitally paint a sunset scene for the first time in maybe ever. And you're like trying to figure out what would a black train look like with sunlight coming from one side from the sunset and then the opposite colors coming from the other side. And you have studied all this classical painting stuff and you understand that stuff a little, but it feels like math in a way of trying to
Yeah.
figure that stuff out. But
Well, it is sort of a math thing because you have to place, in your mind. I mean, I think some people use Blender and stuff to do this. They literally virtually create, the train, and then you can set up a lighting source in Blender and say the light is over here, and then maybe the secondary light is over here, and it's closer to the ground, and so they can actually light these objects, and then use that as painting reference and stuff. Which I'm like, wow, I wish I knew how to use Blender because I can't do any of that. I have to do it all in my head. But I didn't study this in school. So when I was studying at Parsons, I was interested in a completely different kind of art, much more raw and sort of self-expressionist and doing really large scale paintings that were I was mixing my own paints and I was really into process and they were very rough. They were all based on like my dreams and so they were really spooky and weird and strange. Symbolist painting, I was really into the symbolists, French symbolist painting and all this just kind of atmosphere, like weirdness and atmosphere. And then when I started doing these paintings that were riffing on classical paintings, I had to take myself to like self-imposed art school just to sort of reverse engineer how these things were made and learn like, what is grisaille? How did they paint this? Why does it, why are these colors doing these things when they're next to each? I had to learn so much that I didn't, I probably could have taken classes at school that would have helped me with that. I also shunned a lot of like anatomy classes because like, I'm never going to have to paint a realistic human body. I'm doing it my own way. And now it's like, oh God, the clavicle, like figuring out how the leg bone's connected to the thigh bone. It's like having to teach myself things that I guess I'm not reteaching. I'm for the first time trying to teach myself things that I didn't I didn't take oil painting classes. I didn't take if I could do it over, if I could hop in a little time machine and go back and tell myself, hey, you're going to really be grateful later. If you just take a couple of these, I know you think they're boring now, but just take these classes, get the classics locked down, stop having so much fun. It would be really helpful. But you're right. It is sort of a math adjacent. Is it, maybe it's algebra? Trying to figure out, geometry, calculus, trying to figure out, like, if the sun's over here and it's at like a 45-degree angle, then it's going to be hitting everything this way. But then that thing is closer to the ground, so it's going to have a darker shadow. But these things that are higher up are going to have a more diffused shadow. And, it's very, but about style, what you were saying about trying to make something, where you're filtering your love of your influences, right? Like, you love these old cartoons and you're trying to filter that through yourself, right? You are the coffee filter and you're pouring all the things you love into yourself, into your cranium. Your skull is like a big coffee filter, and you're going to see what comes dribbling out of hopefully your hand or your nose, whatever, you're going to see what the essence of this thing that you love, what it's going to be. I think it is a challenge to find that sweet spot between, allowing yourself to feel the love and the influence of the things that you love, and not just being a copycat, or not feeling like, for a lot of people, who are younger than us, they're not going to see it. They won't know because they didn't grow up watching that stuff. They're just it's going to feel retro to them, but they won't get the exact reference.
Well, that happens. And I don't know, some people I've been really loving to dig back further and further into influences of influencers and kind of go back in time that way.
Yeah.
The things that I love and keep digging as far as where things came from. But some people don't, but I think there will always be people who do that too.
I love that. I tell my students to do that whenever they all have to do a presentation about an artist that influences them, a 5-10 minute thing in class. And it's just a nice opportunity for us to all learn about people that maybe we've never heard of. Because I tell them, like, don't just, pick the person we all already know is super cool. Like, dig a little, like, find something else. What's more specific to you? But I tell them they have to climb the tree. I'm using my fingers like little air quotes, climb the tree, which is, don't just show us the person you love, show us who they loved. Like, see if you can find some interview or something with them where they talk about who their influences are. And it's really cool if you can see, like Anita Kuntz, this incredible, illustrator, really likes, according to some stuff that she's talked about, Roger van der Weyden, and Sue Coe. And you can see it, it's like when you look at her work, you can see this, it's like the little DNA trickle, kind of coming down. And I love finding out who different artists are influenced by or who they're in love with and stuff. It's super cool.
And it demystifies people, which I think is super helpful as you mature as an artist, and you can let go of, there's something special about hero worship that feels great when you're young. And the trade-off is that as you get older and learn more, you don't worship these heroes as being above you anymore, and you start to realize, oh, I see where that stuff came from, and I see where they were influenced, and that they are human, and we're just making mistakes and trying things too. So you lose that magic of a hero worship, but also you can grow into being like, hey, that means I can do stuff too.
Yeah, they didn't create that out of nothing.
Yeah, it reminds me.
They were also filtering stuff and running it through their own little coffee filter cranium.
It's like growing up being told that like, for me, with my generation, the bands from the 60s, my parents and everybody would say, these were the best. Led Zeppelin and the Doors were the best musicians that will ever exist, and Jimi Hendrix will never be matched and stuff. And it's like, you learn about their influences eventually, and you're like, oh, Led Zeppelin was basically a cover band in a lot of ways. They were just like covering old Crossroads, blues musicians and stuff with new amplifier technology. So yeah, it's interesting to kind of see people get demystified and be able to kind of take over as the new guard of artists. Is that an expression? Do people say that? The new guard?
I don't know.
Okay.
We're going to make it one. We're going to make it a thing. There's the old guard, right? So why can't we have the new guard?
Yeah. Okay, well, we're running low on time. Let me make sure that we don't miss out on anything. We haven't talked about what you're doing now. What are you working on these days?
I'm doing so many things right now. I often feel, I think I say this all the time, but I can't shake this feeling. You know, the circus performer who's got all the plates on the sticks and they're trying to keep all the sticks twirling so that the plates keep twirling and you can't slow down. Or if you miss a stick, then the plate crashes and maybe it knocks over all the other plates. I'm trying not to live in a state of constant feeling of anxiety. I always am forgetting something on any given day. Like, what am I forgetting?
Yeah.
I am teaching, which I freaking love. I am completely on fire with the love of teaching. I teach at CCA in San Francisco, and I just love it. I really, really do. I love working with all these brilliant young people. It's just astonishingly fun and cool. They're amazing. It's all super cool. So I'm doing that, and when school is in session, when class is in session, it tends to eat a pretty big chunk of my brain because it is completely fulfilling in a way that I was unfamiliar with before I started. You know, this idea of taking everything that I know, or as much of it as I can hold in my brain and body at any one time, everything I've learned myself, taught myself, everything anybody else has passed along to me, anything anybody has mentored me or shared with me, or that I've collected like a little hoarder, a scavenger of knowledge. I want to be this conduit. You know, I want to be a funnel and just kind of transmit as much of it as possible, you know, to my students. And then every once in a while you see it. I mean, it's almost like something visible. You can see like this kind of spark happen sometimes where somebody, I mean, you see them like they sit up a little bit or something, like there's a little physical shift and you see the spark, you've transferred the spark, they get something, or they just got like, I don't know, something happens. It's a magic. It's a form of magic. I'm super into it.
Wow.
And I love this idea. Like, I don't have to worry about, I mean, I have some friends, I think, who are, you know, their art is their legacy, or they're worried about how they're going to be remembered or whatever. It's like, I don't worry about that. It's like, I'm passing sparks. You know, the sparks are going to be carried forward. They're going to turn into torches. And those artists are all going to go forward and keep the world lit up with their stories and their feelings and their emotions. And so I feel really solid about that. Like, that makes me just deliriously happy on any given day. So that's a whole chunk of my life. I'm painting. I'm working on some commissions. I'm working on a piece for a show at the Compound Gallery that I believe opens. I got to finish it because it opens in early November, called, I think it's Mesmerism, or it might just be Mesmer ! But I bet it's Mesmerism. So that's going to be kind of cool. I'm excited to see what everybody else is doing for that. I know we talked a little bit about the joys and miseries of themed shows, which, you know, I think every artist feels the same way. It's like, theme, you know, because there is that thing where it's like, if it doesn't sell, now you have this thing that may or may not fit in with the rest of the body of your work. And if it didn't find a home at that thing that was themed specifically for those people, then where will you ever be able to unload this thing?
Yeah.
But sometimes it works out in sort of weird, unexpected ways. There was a show, I think it was at Capro Gallery, then it was Capro Nason, now it's Capro Gallery, years ago. And the theme was, they'd asked me to be in a show, and I was like, hell yes, love you guys, can't wait, let's do this. They didn't have a theme yet. And then they came back and they said, the theme is dollhouse. And I was like, oh, shoot me in the head. You know, just like, kill me now. Like, I just didn't have anything in mind for that. It was just sort of like, why?
Yeah.
And procrastinate as I do when I'm in a state of denial. But I ended up doing something I really liked. I painted a picture of Wednesday Addams with a necklace of Barbie heads strung around her throat. And then that painting, years later, I got a call from a publisher in France, like, hey, we're publishing this book. We really like this painting. A terrible French accent. Can we license this image and use it on the book cover? And I said, yeah, sounds great. You know, send me a contract, send me some money, we'll do business. And then that turned out to be the French translation of Stieg Larsson's Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which in French is called The Man Who Hates Women. And then that cover got licensed all over the world. Like, if you pick up that book at that period of time in, you know, 12, 20 different countries, that art is on that book, which is just bizarre to me. Like,
of Wednesday Addams? Of
Wednesday Addams, where I'm guessing that maybe the French art director did not know that was Lisa Loring, the actress who played Little Wednesday Addams on the old black and white Addams Family show. I think they just thought, oh, this is a cool picture of a little girl who's clearly dark and disturbed and is wearing a necklace made out of Barbie heads like Kali the Destroyer. And since then, subsequently, I think it's got a different cover now. And in America, unfortunately, they just did like a typographic cover, and then they did a movie tie-in cover, and they didn't use my art. Because I think they knew it's Wednesday Addams, doesn't make a lick of sense. But that was like a happy story about a theme show. Usually the theme shows, I'm not super crazy about it. But I think the mesmerism thing fits into an area of stuff that I'm already interested in. So I'm not super... I'm not hating on that at all. I love it.
So I should hit up some licensing companies with these cool acts.
You could. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, it's strange how things sometimes take off and have a life of their own, with or without you. I mean, sometimes I find, unfortunately, things, or especially this time of year, like come Halloween, a lot of my work gets pirated and printed on shirts, for these sort of fly-by-night companies in China that the stores exist for like a month or two and then they disappear. And apparently I can't do anything about it. I've talked to a lot of copyright lawyers, and it's really frustrating because we just don't share copyright laws the same way. So
no. Yeah, that could be a whole other show.
I know. We could talk about copyright till the cows come home.
How to innovate without getting completely ripped off by the world and demoralized.
It's tough because I think, there is this sense, I try to come at people first with the attitude of an educator, that I think a lot of people mistakenly think if I found it on the internet, it's free for me to do whatever I want to with it. And this is not the case, right? So we try to just gently and kindly educate people to that's not the case. And then if things get worse, then you lawyer up, and you send cease and desist letters and sick lawyers on them.
Okay. So before we go, is there any like words of wisdom that you tell your students like on the first day or the last day that could kind of be encouraging for somebody who's starting off, wants to do what you do and, get into galleries and paint what they want to paint and live your lifestyle?
My lifestyle, my hoarder lifestyle. I think, I feel like anything I say is going to sound like such a cliche and possibly not be helpful and just make people roll their eyes. This is the thing. I feel like I expect people to just roll their eyes regularly.
But we don't have to see it.
That's right. I won't know. You can roll your eyes all you want, unless you're rolling it so loudly that they're rattling like marbles in your skull. I'll never know. I really want to believe, I like to think that this is true, that rather than trying to guess what you think people want, right? I think that's a path to unhappiness, trying to guess, like, I think this will be successful, or I see other people being successful with this, so I'll do that. Like, I don't think that's a way to be happy. And even if it provides brief, monetary success, I mean, God forbid it should actually take off and now you're stuck doing something that you have no real connection to, does not, make your heart sing or your soul breathe or any of these sort of goofy sounding things. But I want to believe that if you pursue something that you genuinely love, that there is sort of a electric magnetic attraction to that. That if you allow your passion to be sort of the guiding light, if you allow your freak flag to come out, whatever it is, and share that with us, share that with the world, that you will find your community, right? I mean, I want to believe that's true because that was my experience. It was like, I think a lot of my early paintings were sort of a visual wolf howl or a werewolf howl to, like Lon Chaney keening into the night, howling this question, right? Which for the long time was, am I the only one that feels this way? Am I the only one that thinks about this stuff? Am I the only one that's wondered about, this or that? And you just sort of float these things out there I'm going to throw all the metaphors. It's a howling wolf. It's the little lanterns with the candles that float off into the sky at night. Like there's these things you can send out into the world that are questions, right? You don't have to have all the answers. You can send questions out. You can put them out in the form of like I don't know, man. I thought this was really cool when I came up with it while I was eating a sandwich today. And I just want to see if anybody else thinks it's cool too. I started painting animals in underpants because I just was so charmed by this vision that I had. It was literally, I can't remember if it was a dream or just something I literally started seeing while I was eating a sandwich. Where it's just like, I want to paint a hedgehog wearing little tighty whities and walking along collecting mushrooms. Just again, like I needed it to exist. Does anybody need that from me? I don't think it's what people expected me to paint. I hadn't done a lot of work like that. I think sometimes when I chase these tangents, people get confused. I think some of my collectors are like, wait, what now? What's she doing now? I don't want to have to worry about staying in one straight line and only painting one thing. Like I want to be free to explore all the things. And so that's kind of to come now fully all the way back to the original question. I think that's what I would encourage my students and anybody to do, is to freely explore the things that make you light up, whether they make you excited or they turn you on or they make you laugh or they make you cry. It's like there's a place for sad art, or they make you angry. There's a place for angry art. There's a place for all this stuff. And if you howl it out, into the night, the good news is, as much as I hate social media, which we could talk about for hours, the one good thing I can think about it is it's given us an opportunity to have community in a way that we didn't. It was harder before. You could still do it. It was just a little harder to find those people. You would go to conventions and stuff and meet the people who were kind of like you. But now you can just float something out onto the internet and you can find the people who howl back to you. Whether your howl is a happy howl or a sad howl or a hilarious howl or an angry, growly howl. I think it's better to be genuine and explore your feelings and share that honestly than to try to second guess what the world, I'm using air quotes with my fingers, and what the world wants, you to do.
Yeah, I think that you've boiled down the difference maybe in two different points of view of everyone in the world. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's
I'm a genius and I didn't even know it.
Maybe there's some third points of view, but the fact is, all the wisdoms that you will hear from anybody who wants to tell you how to earn a living and stuff, get a job, sell things, is the opposite of what you just said. You're supposed to look for holes in the marketplace where, there's a vacuum and people need something that they're not being supplied enough of. Or you should look for things of people who are being successful with something and then make your version of the same thing because people are already buying.
Right.
That if you go on to like YouTube and look for the gurus telling you how to make money on Amazon and stuff, then that's what you're going to hear. You got to start by knowing what people already want and are looking for and are searching for, that search engine optimization kind of point of view. And I guess, what you're saying is the artists do the opposite. You have to set that aside and just make what is interesting and what you love and what makes you light up, like you said, and just see what happens from there. And, it seems to work out.
I believe that. I want to believe it. And I do believe it. And I also think there's something inside us that, I think all of us yearn for some form of connection. We're 98.6% chimp, right? We're social creatures. We're basically chimps with t-shirts and jeans. We're supposed to be, we think ourselves as so sophisticated because we've got computers and stuff.
Cool t-shirts.
Right, we've got cool stuff, but we're genetically pretty much very, very, very much still chimps. And chimps are social animals, and they're meant to be, in contact. We're meant to be in contact with our fellow chimps a lot, all the time. And we seem to be, this concerns me, we seem to be heading into a more isolated state of being. I think the internet sort of allows us to stay home a lot, and I think COVID got a lot of us staying home, and this idea like, oh, maybe this is the dream, the desert island, just being in my own little fiefdom and never having to leave my house. Like, I think most of us, and I include myself in that category, for a very long time I thought that was the dream. I think that's why I wanted to be a freelance illustrator. It's why I wanted to be an artist. I didn't want to have a boss. I have a problem with authority. I have an authority complex. I don't like being
Mhm.
told what to do. I'm not fit for work. And I thought the dream was to just be in my own little solitary cell, like Frankenstein's monster, just in my little cave doing my own thing.
Mhm.
And it turns out I have realized the one tiny grain of wisdom I've picked up along the years is I actually I'm not a misanthrope. It was never that I hated people. I just thought the dream was being alone. And it turns out it's actually really nice being part of a community or being with people or finding your tribe, your friends, your like-minded, your family, like whoever it is, your chosen family. I'm really big on in chosen family. There's a way to stay connected that I think is so important to us as mostly chimp beings that I worry we're kind of sliding towards being really isolated from each other.
Yeah.
I don't want to end on a down note. Let's think of a joke.
No, I have an up note, but also I want to, yeah, acknowledge that. And since we moved from the Bay Area, that's been really the hardest thing for me. Is that people were already kind of being ousted from the Bay Area because of getting priced out of their apartment, or their
Yeah.
jobs were, opportunities were changing. Um, anyway, but at least if you were going to find somebody who was interested in doing something and making something, you could find them there. And that's been tough since I moved. But what was the upside? Oh, quick movie recommendation. I just watched Paint with Owen Wilson, and it's a comedy loosely based on the character of Bob Ross. And I mean, it's not any kind of biopic or anything, obviously, but they kind of take that character and do something with it. And it's funny, but also they explore and have this theme that they take you through by the end of the film of, are you making art that you think somebody wants, or are you doing something that is lighting you up, like you said, that is making you excited? What images are in your head make you excited? And that was just a great theme to kind of see explored in a movie, and just like art making and all of it. And it's funny. So it was a great movie.
Oh, I love Bob Ross. I'd like to see that. Maybe I need to curate another little film series. I've been showing we have like a backyard movie night that we do here
Hmm.
most weekends. And Marcos, my better half, curated an 11 film noir series because that's his thing. He's just really into film noir, so we got to watch a lot of amazing movies at night under the stars. And then I'm in the middle of my film series, which Marcos calls my estrogen horror fest,
Yeah.
because it's all horror movies that are either written or directed or both, or based on the works of women. So, we showed The Bride of Frankenstein and The Haunting, based on Shirley Jackson's
Yeah.
writing. And we showed Near Dark, Catherine Bigelow. And just last week, we showed Girl Walks Home Alone at Night.
I haven't heard
Such
of
a great movie. And oh my God, it's so good. It's so beautiful. It's the first Iranian vampire spaghetti Western.
that.
It's just a
Right.
brilliant movie. It's so good. But both Catherine Bigelow and Lily Anna Amirpour, the directors of those two films, went to school to study painting and sculpture, and then sort of slid sideways into filmmaking, which I think is so interesting. Again, not being afraid to, sort of chase the muse off into the woods in some unexpected direction and just sort of pursue whatever style of storytelling was going to best allow them to get out the stuff that they had inside of them and stuff, which is just so
Yeah.
cool. It's so groovy.
I don't know if it counts in your theme, but it sort of reminded me of some more modern horror that I've seen that has like a female lead that isn't just running away from an axe murderer, like A24 makes some fantastic
Oh,
stuff that
yes.
really
So good.
gets me like disturbed in a way that other movies just don't. I don't know why, but like Hole in the Woods, I believe is what it was called. So good. It's like Irish countryside and this single mom trying to raise a kid, and she just starts to get the feeling that this kid isn't her kid anymore. It's something
Oh, like a
else. Like a
changeling.
changeling. So good.
Ooh, I like a good changeling story.
But she's a great, like,
We just,
strong, relatable character that like I think it scared the crap out of me because I like loved her. Like, wow, this character is
yes.
so like lovable and great. You want good things for her, and like this horrible stuff is going on, and you're like, oh, be okay.
You're emotionally invested.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. When you said single mom, I was so sure you were going to say the Babadook. I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. That was a good one too.
We just saw, speaking of A24, we just saw The Substance.
I haven't seen that.
That's actually written and directed by a French woman. I'm spacing on her name right now, but that's really good.
There was
I don't want to say anything about it. You should just see
okay.
it.
What's it called again?
The Substance.
The Substance.
I will say something about it. Demi Moore plays an aging actress, which is perfect casting for her.
Okay.
She's playing someone just turning 50, which is completely believable, even though she's 61. She looks great. And basically, I don't think it's a spoiler because it's in all the trailers for the movie, but the substance allows you to kind of split and be a perfect, beautiful, younger version of yourself for 7 days. And then you have to switch back every 7 days or else. You can imagine how that might go badly.
Wow.
And it does. So much body horror.
It sort of reminded me of that Hammer. Was it Lady Dracula or Countess Dracula? Same kind of thing. Loosely based on that woman who would
Elizabeth Bathory.
Yeah, she would kill all of her servants and bathe in their blood and
Yeah,
everything.
bathe in their blood.
Yikes.
The things we go through.
See, we are ending on a high note.
Bathing in the blood of virgins. Good times.
Well, Isabel, there's just like so much stuff that I feel like we could have talked about, and I hope that we can do it again sometime.
Well, yeah, Ben, when you're ready to do the 4-hour extended version, I'm just here painting away in my cave. So
the Dune director's cut of podcast.
Right, when we do the unexpurgated director's cut, hook me up. I'm here.
This has been the Cheap Chills Show. For more spooky fun, follow us on Instagram at Cheap Chills Fan Club. Thank you for listening.